liberty in America is under assault. We no longer live in a reality that includes property rights. We're no longer the kings of our own castle. We no longer enjoy the true benefits of capitalism. Instead, we're negotiating our rights with our own government. This isn't how our country was founded. These aren't the ideas of our founders. It's time to seize back our country. This is the Liberty Hour, where these important issues will be discussed for the sake of America's future. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Constitution in the other, here's your host, Sean Thompson.
This is the Liberty Hour. Now, normally on the show, that's Sunday nights 8 to 9. I've been offered an opportunity through AM 560 for a podcast. So you know what? You could swear, but keep it friendly on the podcast. I guess that's the big thing. Either that or I calmed their nerves that they were worried I would swear during the Joe Walsh show, which I think, because I could always tell when I fill in for Joe Walsh, like I just did on Thursday and Friday, boy, oh boy, did the bigwigs stay late. It's fun to watch them do it. It's like watching a Teamster work. It's very rare. But there's one thing that I always like to point out to people, and I have noticed this since I was a little kid and the first time my grandfather bought a vacuum from a door-to-door salesman. No matter how smart, no matter how educated, how successful, how confident, what a good person, you can be deceived. And that is what happens in the body politic of our lives. We have been overthrown. The people who believe in freedom and liberty, people who used to, when I grew up, I'm an old man now, still kick the shit out of Coco Joe Moreno, though, any day of the week and twice on Sunday, and we'll get to that scumbag later. Alderman, please, that fish-face fraud. But anyway, you were taught that you are the king of your castle. The old man would walk around, he'd come home, no matter how successful, even if he was a janitor, if he was a bricklayer, if he was pretty much just a bum on the street who spent his time drinking, he was still the king of that castle. And he came in that house, he pulled up those pants, he said, "This is my house, baby." And government stops at the sidewalk. Well, from that time to now, you're an indentured servant. You're a slave, dummy. You think you could buy your own insurance? No. Too stupid for that. You think you understand what kind of problems you create by living itself? No, you are guilty. And we've got taxes for breathing air, cars farting. We've got dimwits who are bartenders making up bills and plans to change the entire economy of the greatest nation on the face of the planet. And what's the retort? Oh, come on. She's a Democrat and we're Republicans. And then who's going to do the fixing of these problems with these socialists, with these communists in drag? The Republicans? Like who? Like the ones who negotiated this nonsense, this ridiculous nonsense that Donald Trump built an election on. Now listen, my problem with immigration is not that of the standard Republican. I am not a cattle drive radio. I don't care one way or the other about the trick in front of me. I want to solve the problem behind the curtain, which is welfare in this country. That is the fix to immigration. But that being said, don't tell me I'm winning when I'm losing. I thought Elizabeth Warren was the Indian. Am I the only one? Right? The high cheekbones and Pocahontas and the whole 9 yards. Who negotiates like an Indian? This is the worst deal in American history since the Indians sold Manhattan for 18 beans. This is how ridiculous this bill is. It's preposterous. And we could go around and argue and, it's kind of a win. I know you wanted 5.6, you got 1.4, and it's a win, and we can go on and win the election, and he'll steal the money from here and steal the money from there, all the time without focusing on the real issue at hand, history. Now, the way you defeat the Soviets, the way you defeat communism is the way you always defeated it. The answer is in history, right? We know that on the philosophical arguments we have from the slaughter of mankind and baby abortions/killings, all the way to how you fight wars, all the way to the ideology that cripples nations, where nations are destroyed from within, the corruption and the socialism. It's always the answer. But moreover, the answer to how you know you're being deceived is when there are past proposals that were laughed at by so-called Republicans, laughed at. I'll never forget, and believe me, when I say this to you, I am not a supporter, may he burn in hell, of John McCain or that fraudulent Gang of Eight. And I say that for his vote on the yoke of tyranny called Obamacare that hampers all of us today. All right? Nothing else other than the vote of Obamacare. But he put together years and years ago, and I believe it started when one George Bush, it might even be prior to the bailouts. In fact, I know it is, as I have an article in my hand dated '06, right? Democrats support the wall. Democrats support money for border protection. So I pull up this little article, and it's from an ABC news station on the west coast of America in 2006. And what this is a caption of the proposed Gang of Eight, their bill that they put forward, bipartisan. And this is when everything was, George Bush was a compassionate conservative, and everything was going to be rosy. And what this bill had was $40 billion towards border security over a 10-year period. Ironically, what this bill had immediately was $4.5 billion immediately for border security. This is in 2006. So if you inflationally adjust, oh, look at my guy in there. Shake your head. Come on. Tell me where I'm wrong. Let's go. Yeah, go ahead. Come on in. Come on. This is Dan Proft. Dan Proft shaking his head. Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Anyway. Okay, Justin, you in the yoga pants. Turn on his mic, will you? God's sakes.
I was just walking by innocently. I'm no more listening to you now than I do when you call into my show.
Oh, but it's right.
So you know.
Because I'm right then, and I'm right now. Uh-huh. And the issue is I listened to you this morning, and you want to tell me this Elizabeth Warren negotiated Indian settlement of $1.4 billion for the wall, of which, by the way, I'm going to tell you, that's not my issue. But don't tell me that this is a win. Donald Trump's $1.4 billion for wall security is a win.
Well, it's what you can win. What do you think he's going to get? So your suggestion would be what?
Well, first of all,
the government again, emergency powers. What's the suggestion?
For a guy who's not married, you sure do negotiate like a battered husband. It's not what's the win. We don't change the definition of winning because we have to talk ourselves into going home at night.
What's the play?
The play is he had everybody by the balls.
What is the play now? You can't, unless you have a time machine.
Shut
the
son of a bitch down.
So you want to shut the government down?
I want to shut it down. Absolutely. I didn't want to open it. That's when you had them on their knees. That's when you had principles. That's when you could have come up with an answer to shut everybody up. The GOP, by Mitch McConnell with the old lady face, is going to offer zero interest-free loans to all government workers affected by the shutdown. And you win the principle of the argument. You're not going to, and now we have to go through these gymnastics where we talk ourselves into accepting the fact that this is somehow a win, where he's going to have to seize money. And here's the other problem. It opens the door for a fiat presidency. It opens the door for him to do things he shouldn't have to do that is really usurping the power of Congress because he's going to divert money. We all know.
Or he could do something like what was suggested, a federalist play, which is not a fiat presidency, which is to work with state and local administrations that are friendly to do on the border through state and local what you can't do federally, and state of Texas being the prime example of that, but potentially Arizona as well. So, I'm not so sure about that. And I wouldn't characterize this as a win. I would characterize this as take the deal so you can set yourself up for a win in 2020. Because, just like the left, my end game with respect to Trump's perspective is 2020, and that's what it should be. That's why Eric Erickson, never Trumper, is a never Trumper no more, because he recognizes what has been accomplished and he recognizes the threats we face on the horizon in 2020. So you can't look at this in a vacuum. You have to look at this in a realpolitik way with a perspective of November 2020.
I think it's that realpolitik way that gets us to the problems we can never get rid of.
Well, but you have to deal with the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is Pelosi as Speaker. The reality on the ground is you have a lot of squeamish Republicans, particularly in the Senate, where you don't have much margin. Obviously, in the House, you have a deficit. So again, you want a government shutdown, a partial government shutdown, from now until rapture, from now until 2020. You want to go back to what Trump said initially, months, maybe a year. Is that something that you would count?
Here's what I'm aware of when I'm listening to you. I am not trying to conflate the two issues, but I am trying to use one as an example of what happens when you take this position you've taken. This is the same type of talking yourself into false victories and future wins that took Illinois from a viable, savable state and put us into this position. It is the same kind of a retreat of your fundamentals and beliefs and morals.
It's not.
It's immoral what we're doing.
It's not. I mean, what is the moral issue at stake between 1.4 billion and 5.7 billion, between 55 miles and 200 miles? What is the moral principle at stake here? There isn't one. This is about practicality. This is about practical solutions to challenges on the ground, and how far can you advance at part of the solution that where there is a discrepancy. So that's what we're talking about, miles and dollars. But this is an argument about degree, not an argument about kind.
And my point is, this is an article where you've now settled for 30% of the money that was offered in the Gang of Eight bill that everyone said was too liberal, was not enough money. It's 30% of the money.
But the reality on the ground is different than when the Gang of Eight bill was proposed.
It's worse.
And so is the president.
It's way worse.
So is the president different.
Oh, I'm trying to do all I can with the guy who can get stuff done.
Well, and I'm the first one to say, the 2 years you had to run to the place, and you made a mistake because this is your main thing, and you have to take care of your main thing mainly. And so there was an opportunity missed, and now you're paying the price for that because you're going to get, as you suggest, a quarter of a loaf, a third of a loaf, not even half or three quarters, much less the full thing. That's what you can get. I mean, and remember, you moved Pelosi from $1 and walls are immoral to 55 miles and 1.4 billion.
She doesn't know if it's Tuesday or July. But what
that's who you have to deal with.
What you get here is what Rahm Emanuel said when he was on George Stephanopoulos' show a week ago. Why solve this when you could run on it? And we handed them a victory because their side is going to do everything our side's doing. The issue is the interpretation of losses is for the party. The trenches are deeper. But nonetheless, we, the people, lost. The politics, both Republicans and Democrats, this is a big win for them because they could run on this rather than head in a direction of solving it. Well, we're just as divided as we were prior to the agreement, if not more.
But if you do you think we would be unified as a country if they would have just said, sure, 5.7 billion, 200 miles, not a problem? If Democrats would have done that, which they never would do, you're talking about people who think, again, walls are immoral, abolish ICE.
We don't have to be unified as a country.
But you were talking about we're just as divided. Of course we're going to be divided because we have very different ideas of what border security and immigration policy should look like. So what's about divided? Do you think there's anything that presents us the opportunity to get to like a 95% agreement?
No.
Unanimity?
There is
the world moment?
I told you, my issue is not even the wall. I want to fix the welfare. That's the real problem.
Well,
the wall to me is a speed bump. And the division I speak of isn't between us and the communists. That's always going to be there. Yeah. The problem we have is when we compromise with our principles. And the division that I speak of is within the so-called conservative movement.
But this is an opportunity. This, to me, I see as a stepping stone to address some of the other matters that have been bandied about but have all been subordinated to miles and dollars. And so, for example, the welfare state thing. Now is the time to say, oh, by the way, I have an idea to expedite people who want to come to this country legally, as long as they're properly vetted, and also people who want to expedite a path to citizenship, waive off welfare state benefits until you're a citizen.
That's great.
How about that? I mean, and also I want to do something with the DACA designees. I'm going to continue to do something now that we've exposed the Democrats as really uninterested in the future of those 800,000 young people. I'm still interested in them, so we're going to do something on that. So now's the time you can get to some of these other issues under the umbrella of immigration policy because there are a lot of other issues.
We're losing the fight because we're losing at slow motion, in my opinion. And Illinois is where this kind of flaccid resistance to bad ideas leads, to where there is nothing left but bad ideas. And I see this happening when you refuse to correct the core issue of the problem and you deal in symptoms. So now is the time, before you sign this, to negotiate that, because this idea that we somehow are going to lose a little bit now but win in the future, It never happens.
We're not losing a little bit. We're gaining a little bit. We're just not gaining as much as we would have liked to have gained. I mean, if Trump would have got 5 points, let me try this a different way. If Trump would have got $5.7 billion and 200 miles of wall, then would you be saying, well, this guy is a genius, all our problems are solved, this is long term, this is the end of the conversation?
No, of course not. I would have said it's nice. It's nice to win. What I would have said, it's nice to be a conservative, or nice to be somebody who says, well, I don't really like him, but I'm going to see what he does, and he does something right, because I'm not buying any of it. I honestly think, and now what I think we've lost in a massive way, because as so-called Tea Party people, we at least had three focused points. Welfare state correction. We had spending the debt. These are things, and we had the elimination of Obamacare. All three of those things, we don't stand a chance on anymore. And you're talking short time. It was only 8 years ago.
I understand.
8 years ago, the Tea Party was strong, and they had the whole thing. Now look at us. It's ridiculous. We are on our backs, man. And the problem is there's no tap out. What there is servitude. And what there is negotiating away how fast you're going to be. Look, you know what's happening with Obamacare. It's bankrupting the nation. You know what's happening with the debt. You're looking at it happen here. We're being destroyed. I drove here. There's 50 closed businesses that were open 3 months ago.
I understand, but you also have to understand the personnel challenge that the president has, because, for example, the members of Congress that states like Illinois send him. No, I'm talking about the Republicans.
I get it, but are his actions leading to the destruction of those people? No. That's my problem. What you did is you handed Mitch McConnell forever.
But you've got people that are in office now, and those are the appropriators. And so, and not to mention, you greenlight this bipartisan working group. I mean, if you want to criticize a decision, I think it's much more arguable to criticize the decision to open up this February 15th extended window, end the partial shutdown, and deleverage yourself at that point to put together this working group and give them until February 15th. I would have kept the partial shutdown in place until you had a deal. Maybe you could have extracted more because, frankly, you were imposing more pain, mainly on the Democrats and their constituencies, which are the portion of federal workers who feel like they're entitled to wonderful stories about themselves on the network news and a blank check from taxpayers. I think that was the opportunity. Maybe you could have got more. But once he made that decision, now you're in this and empowered that bipartisan working group with Republicans. Now you're in this position. So you're essentially saying, I'm going to cut this deal. I want to cut a deal, and I want to move on. Now the question is, how do you move on? As soon as he ended the partial shutdown, this eventuality that we saw announced last night.
So you agree
was
with
inevitable.
You agree with me? Shouldn't have ended it without a clear.
He shouldn't have ended the partial shutdown. Right. But I don't want this stop and start thing does not redound to his benefit. So once you did that, once you said I'm going to give you this 3-week grace period that Lindsey Graham wanted from the outset, and you deleverage, then you actually put yourself in a weaker negotiation position. You left yourself to this point. So this was the inevitable outcome, and it's not ideal, but it is still an incremental benefit to the position that President Trump has and people serious about border security have. And now it's what does he do with this stepping stone that he's got, at least if he takes.
So he sure did set us up to rally us for the next election. I mean,
yes.
I feel like we've been played. This is what it's like to be a husband. You're never going to know, but this is it. So if you want to get to the promised land, you better buy those shoes with the red sole for $1,800. This is how it looks. We've been set up. So I bring you that perspective. You just tell me every time I want you on the air to say, we definitely took a loss, but can we spin it? Okay, I'll go with that. But to start off and say this is some sort of a victory, I think is terrible.
I said take the deal. I said take the deal. Right. Like, hey, I'm putting in the W or L column.
Listen,
it's like for, the silly pundits on the network cable shows. I'm just saying, should he take the deal or not? Vote yes or no. And I say take the deal for these reasons. It's not about characterizing as a win or loss. It's about thinking about winning in 2020.
All right. Well, listen, I know you got to go to this.
Yeah, right. Now you can call me names and behind my back.
No. I call them to your face. Ridiculous. All right. We got a call. Let's go to Bob. Bob, thank you so much in Buffalo Grove. How are you, buddy?
Thanks for taking my call, Sean, and good talking to you again, Dan. I'd take the deal and run with this.
He left.
And run with this and just Trump ought to just say, I wanted to build the wall. You didn't give me a Congress that would accept me. In 2020, vote in a Congress that's going to build the wall for me.
Which is kind of, Bob, that's kind of my point. We've been set up. And I'm so tired as somebody who believes in what fundamentals used to be, who believes in that what has become a joke is that the individual liberty of us and the freedom and the look at what's happening, brother. You've got an onslaught of communists that have won. You've got dimwits, 29-year-old dimwits proposing a bill to seize everything in the country. I mean, you do realize this is what's going on, that we are now put in a position where we cannot even wiggle and fight about the fact that we are bad for Earth itself, and therefore we have to be penalized. We've lost the fundamentals and principles, and I don't think that happens overnight. The way that we've gotten to this point is by talking ourselves into victory in the face of defeat. And this is what this is. And Bob, you'd be surprised to know this. My issue is not this wall. I think you could have maybe taken the Gang of Eight bill when it talks about the money for the wall. That's enough. I would have taken this. This would have been a great bill. But you told me, all the conservatives who are selling me this today, this loss that Trump is about to sign, you're the ones who told me this Gang of Eight thing, which in comparison is a Chinese wall in comparison to what we got today. Because this Gang of Eight bill addressed some of those issues of welfare that Dan and I were talking about. Because this is what happens in government. When a program is imploding and going bankrupt, instead of what you and I do in our lives, which is eliminate it, change our behavior, and figure out how to fix it, government doubles down on the failure because it knows that loss is the way in which they can levy future taxes and penalties on the American people. So they never lose. And in fact, we lose when we can't identify what a loss is anymore. So before he signs this, if all of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, okay, I'm going to sign this, but anybody who's new to this country and any kid on DACA, their parent pays tuition for public schools. Ta-da! That's a huge win. But where are those ideas? Where are those ideas? Hey, you want to be a citizen and you really believe in America? Sign up for the armed forces. Anybody in that family over 18 commits to a 10-year agreement in the armed forces, and ta-da, you're citizens. However, if you don't, you're not eligible for anything. Nothing. No Obamacare, no schools, no food programs, no Section 8 housing, nothing. And you would turn the country around. We have to flank the socialist on proving to him that our way of capitalism and our way of a true economy by the individual is the only way to be American, period, end of story. Because this is what the Soviet socialists knew 70 years ago. This is why the guy, what's his name, Khrushchev told Kennedy, I'll take you down without firing a shot. Do you know that son of a bitch was right? Look at where we're at. Look at who the Democrats are, and tell me the Soviets didn't win the Cold War. You can't. And it's on these major issues, when you take a major defeat or a major compromise of your principle, you cannot go back. That's why Dan and I were talking. You can't go back to the shutdown. You had one chance not to muck that up, and you mucked it up. And now you've got to take this where you're bent over, your wrists are tied to your ankles, and you're just hoping somebody horny doesn't walk by. In the meantime, that's what's happening here. And I'm telling you, brother, the problem isn't that it happened. The problem is that our think tank, our hardcore, principled, fundamental conservatives who believe in freedom are talking themselves in to this as a victory. It's not. This is exactly what you and I lived through in Illinois. Exactly. You know, first of all, I got to tell you, there's not a smarter son of a gun in the world. You know that. I love the kid, Dan Pratt. Love him. Great kid. I heard him say the same thing when Rauner won. When Rauner won. And I said, well, you realize he's ruled by the wife. You realize even though he's got some positions that aren't terrible on schools, he's still one of those spend and give guys. Only he's doing it with us. He's still going to lose on the principled issues of abortion, on the principled issues of public funding for abortion. He's going to lose on the Second Amendment. By the way, the stuff that's happening in Illinois, I don't know if you're aware of it, where you could say my wife's cousin is kind of a crackpot. I think he's a danger. They go in and take all his weapons. That's a major blow to an amendment. It's a major blow to a right. And that was set up by a flaccid Republican like Bruce Rauner. If I would rather outright lose and say, now there's a scumbag in, than pretend we won with failure. And that's what Republicans do. They pretend they win with failure. They talk themselves into believing half a loaf is better than a full loaf. That's on earning an income for your family. That's not on denying your principles. Right? Half a loaf is better than a full loaf. I've heard this on every topic, from debt to taxing to abortion. And it's not a win. It's not a half a loaf for the victims of those failures. You never compromise your fundamentals and your principles, because when you're right, that's when you lose. Somebody who's wrong has nothing to lose. There's no such thing as a compromise from somebody with a wrong answer. They just gain. We lose with the right answer. And that's what's happening to me. So maybe I'm wrong, Bob, and I hope I am. I really do. I hope I'm wrong. But I hoped I was wrong about George Bush, and I was right. I hoped I was wrong about Barack Obama, but I was right. I hoped I was wrong about Donald Trump. Guess what this proves? I'm right. So thank you. I appreciate it, Bob. We got to just stop lying to ourselves first. Thank you. See, that's the thing, brother. To me, it's of major importance that we stop lying to ourselves, because the other side of what we're really dealing with is the mindset of a self-enriching, covetous failure who believes that if but for his circumstances, he could run the world. And this happens not just when Karl Marx and Engels, who two spoiled brat trust fund babies, hate their father and have an idea how to build a society instead of going to work on the line in the warehouse for the dad. This happens when we cast upon failures and underachievers and people who, for all account, have no problem looking at their fellow man and saying, I could run your life better than you. What happens is an idiot like Beto O'Rourke becomes a threat to your individual freedom.
Oh, this is inspiring. This is the border standing up for itself. This is El Paso telling our story. No one can tell it better than we can. Safe, strong, secure community. That's who we are.
No, that's not true. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And from that little crowd of dimwits, this guy almost came within a hair, a breath of unseating one of the last conservatives in America, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz barely beat this guy. In a state like Texas, that's what's frightening. It's not frightening so much as when a socialist in a state like Illinois is touted and accepted and cheered as a next real thinker. What do you expect? We're surrounded by communists here. Look at what we have right now as a debate who's going to take over a major city in the state of Illinois, Chicago. Look at them. 17 freaks, versions of the same failures. They all have exactly the same idea, just different numbers they're going to throw. But there's no principled person there. Not one. And I know everyone, Paul Vallis is probably the cleanest piece of dung. Fine. Okay, great. He's still a tax and spend, mindless, cast upon his neighbor, his values, and his fundamentals at the blink of an eye. Just like Beto O'Rourke, just like Ocasio-Cortez, just like the pseudo-intellectual reporters who, instead of asking true questions, follow the talking points of propaganda. Listen, a lot of times when you criticize Donald Trump, you're categorized as a never-Trumper. That was never my issue. I got news for you people. There's only one son of a bitch in Illinois that had a Donald Trump tie in 1984, and it's me. Don't tell me if I like a guy or not. Only one of us, even in Illinois, could have been accepted into the circle of partying hard, strippers and supermodels and flying all over. That's me too. I'd have loved him. As a person, love him. However, when he's wrong, he's wrong. And since when do we start treating people like family members? I say this all the time. No one's married to these guys. I got a tweet from a guy listening to the show I was criticizing when Dan's show was going on about, talking yourself into a winner or loser. And the guy said, listen, Sean, he's our best guy, and I trust him a little bit more. And I said to myself, we're grown-ups, aren't we? What kind of a grown-up trusts an absolute stranger with his freedom, with his future, with his liberty? And you realize where we're at in America. We are true victims of the whims and word and integrity of those who sell their soul to get elected. And that's a bipartisan. You want bipartisanship? There it is. That's bipartisanship. I've always said that the guy who can call himself a Democrat is either in on the scam or too stupid to know what a scam is. And it's amazing. Could you imagine being a fiscally conservative, principled, somewhat religious Democrat and look at what has happened to your party? What I recognize is these are good people. I know these people. I grew up in a Democrat community. My father-in-law was a union president, not a more principled, wonderful guy in the world, all the best intentions. And look at what the unions are. They're freaking crime organizations. The Democrat Party is a freaking Soviet-style socialism that is almost unimaginable what they can do to their fellow man. And look at what happens in the great city, what used to be great, of Chicago, Illinois, where each and every so-called leader decides to limit the amount of property a citizen living in Illinois can keep, or Chicago in particular. They said, I was watching Flannery Fired Up, and where they said $2.5 million to Bill Daley. Boy, that's a lot of money. And they have no problem, each and every one of them sitting there and saying, give me 80%, give me 90%. F you, give me 100%. That is the mindset of a tyrant. And the problem isn't the mindset. That's always going to be there. That's what we are. Evil by nature. That's what we are. The problem is the acceptance of the other 16 frauds who think he's just wrong on the percentage, not on the principle. And this is what it looks like when you're unmoored from your fundamentals, when you're unmoored from your principles, when you're unmoored from the documents that are supposed to be the covenant between government and man. What is that covenant anymore? You have to fear that government doesn't target you. You have no protection. Zero, end of story. And if you think you can afford an attorney to put up that fight, good luck, brother. Good luck. Because that's another scumbag industry. So the reality is, those people who thought, I'm going to put in place a system where the citizen has protection against tyranny, they're rolling over in their graves like they were hooked to a Black & Decker. Can you imagine how the people who actually risked their future, their lives, their fortune, it was only a third. 1/3 fought the king. That's it. So I have no illusion of any kind of we're all going to get along and continuity and a nation of one vision. That's bullshit sold by dimwits. I just want that third to always stay vigilant, always stay focused, and always stay principled. Where are they? You tell me. So I was on Joe Walsh's show, which I still thank him for that opportunity. And really, when you think about it, I have no credentials for this radio. I've never been in broadcasting. I never even knew what a soundboard was. Nothing. I have no business being here. Right? These are people that I was just calling into radio shows to argue with Dan and Bruce a million years ago. And they said, here's the opportunity. And now the idea that they entrust me with this, it's flattering, it's humbling. I don't want to mess up. But I have to take the opportunity to stand for what I believe in. So when I was filling in for Joe Walsh, we were talking about what is our recourse? What is the recourse of the free man in a society becoming ever more tyrannical? And you know what the recourse is to unite and come together. Not in the way labor unions do it, where they limit people and they guarantee corruption and payoff and extortion. That's not what a capitalist is. Not in the way Wilbur Ross, Trump's old man and Viagra liaison, link up businesses to agreed upon tariffs and taxes to protect production and workers' pay and profit. No, not like that either. That's corporatism. So this is how you disarm the good and honest, if they're still out there, so-called Democrat. I'm not for that either. Because when they rally against fraudulent, corrupt capitalism, corporatism, they're right. They're wrong when they want to implement socialism. They're wrong with the Cory Bookers and the Ocasio-Cortezes and the Beto O'Rourkes. These are dimwit frauds, demigods. So they're always wrong when it comes to that. But we can capture them because they're right on their knee-jerk rejection of the corruption, of the principle of fraud. Because in each and every one of us, in each and every baby, is the longing to be free. We are born with that. That's not granted, you could argue about the Enlightenment all you want, but that's within human beings. Few human beings are happy being slaves, and the ones who are lost anyway. But we have a time period in this country right now where the capitalists must unite in the idea of principle. The Tea Party was here today, gone tomorrow, and the proof is in the acceptance of this bullshit bill. Where's the freaking Tea Party? Huh? Same guys who chanted how terrible the Gang of Eight bill was. The Gang of Eight bill looks like Neiman Marcus compared to this Kmart shit you just accepted. And yet mum's the word among the old-fashioned Tea Party guys because they sold out too. And they're always going to sell out. That's what man is. He's a sellout. Everybody. Me too. There's just got to be a big number. If Bezos' wife comes along, I'll be a huge Democrat. Believe me, okay? She says, boy, that guy over there is cute, which I am. I'd be a huge sellout. Whatever you want, honey. Feet up, rubbing her toes like she's pretty, the whole 9 yards. I'm all in. There's my number. $150 billion. Until then, I'm going to hang on to the principles I have. And it's time for all of us to do that. That's why I have a little idea. I said it on Joe Walsh's show. I'm going to go meet with the head guy here. Maybe it's a crackpot idea. But so is the idea of being a servant to a king and saying, F you, fat boy, I'm free. That's a crazy idea. Liberty, a bunch of farmers fighting the most successful military force on the planet at the time, that was freaking crazy. But you and I are the benefactors of that. Crazy idea. I got another crazy idea. You know, I know the kids in there looking at me. Well, first of all, I think it's crazy to wear yoga pants, but look at what you do. Anyway, the crazy idea I have is for capitalists to come together and stop producing. Capitalists and free men, put your shovel down. Because the government shutdown negotiated by people of low character and a low understanding of what we're fighting for, that gets us this kind of deal we just accepted. But the principled fighting of where I'm not producing if you're going to take it, that is how you win. Cripple them. Can you imagine if I think Duffy is still the president of the Mercantile Exchange. He's a great guy. He's a regular freaking guy. Made his own money. Wasn't born with the spoon in his mouth. If he says, you know what? God, I think this guy's right. I think that if one of these 17 fraud, low-life scumbags running for Chicago mayor, they're going to put LaSalle Street tax on at the blink of an eye. And before I let my people, my members, my business of free trade and freedom and speculation and investment, before I let it get seized, I'll shut that son of a bitch down. I love it. I love it. And you bring it to a halt. Then the New York Stock Exchange. Then the commodity and ports around the country. We're the free men. We are. Then the independent businesses, the entrepreneurs, the contractors, anybody who takes pride in his liberty. And you just sit down. You cripple them because what they are running on is a freaking sleight of hand trick scam called socialism. It doesn't work. And if it does, the USSR would be the strongest economic power on the planet. In the meantime, it's some theme bar in Vegas with a bunch of Russians and cheap accents who are probably Polish. That's what it really looks like. It's a fraud. It's time now, well, we still have some of us left to make the world go wrong. Because here's the other thing. If you don't do it, then you turn into Illinois, where every time I drive to this freaking studio, every single time, there's another business gone, another for rent sign. Illinois is the example of where a compromise of your beliefs leads. Now, I'm going to pick up and get the hell out of here. Which, by the way, next week there will be no podcast. I'm going to do that. But what are you going to do when it's the country? Where are you going to go? I guess there was a guy, we agreed, the guy with the English accent, might as well go to Costa Rica, right? The women aren't 700 pounds, and I can be tan. Go out with a little style. We'll be back tomorrow. That's going to be the last time for a week. And I'm going to be slowly getting the hell out of here, tearing myself away from loved ones, away from friends, away from a life built. But that's what it looks like. And you have to do unpleasant things for liberty. You have to inconvenience yourself for freedom. The problem is we're spoiled brats, and we pretend we don't want to be. We are spoiled. Put a fight up. Don't trust anybody. I like Big Donnie. I like his choice in girls. Very, very happy. Sure, flying around the whole 9 yards. He screwed us. I'm sorry, he screwed us. And he screwed us when he let Wilbur Ross and Peter Navarro and that Liza Minnelli freak Democrat hack, Paul Mnuchin, whatever his first name is irrelevant. By the way, kid, if you get a chance, Google Paul Mnuchin's wife, and you want to talk about a guy willing to live with a lie. Please, scumbag. We'll be back tomorrow.